Hi, good morning. It's Imogen here with Body Intelligence, and I'm joined today again by my good friend and trauma awareness activist, Shay Seaborne. We're now collaborating to offer some workshops and courses for people dealing with chronic stress and trauma. And Shay's own personal experience as a trauma survivor and her understanding of the neuroscience relating to trauma is lovely pairing with my kind of practical, mindful tools and concepts from Body Intelligence. So, welcome, Shay.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes. So today, the topic of this conversation is regulation, what that means, why we might want a well-regulated nervous system, and how that can help us not flip our lid, so to speak, or how to come back from if that does happen. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's start with the absolute basics. What is regulation and what is a well-regulated nervous system, and why might we want that?
So many questions.
Yeah, but it felt like they're all kind of wrapped together that it was hard to be unpick. So
yeah. A well-regulated nervous system is basically one that is able to respond to what's happening in the present.
Okay.
Sounds easy, right?
Yeah. So tell me more. What would be some qualities of it's not a person because we can move in and out, right? But what would be some qualities that are available to someone when they're in a well-regulated state? I don't know if I'm in fact using the terms quite correctly, but if that makes sense.
Yeah, when we're well regulated, we are responding to what's happening in our current environment, which usually is not a major threat. Sometimes it is, and we do need to be able to respond effectively when it is. But when we get dysregulated, we are generally responding to something that happened before, that the current environment reminds us of. So we are out of touch with what's actually happening, and generally will have an exaggerated response to it, a reaction. And that's one way to know that you are dysregulated, when your reaction is out of proportion to what's happening right now. You are having a response to something that happened before.
So is it always from the past? Could it be concern, worry, stress about what could happen? And they're probably related, right?
Right. Yeah. Worrying about the future is also not being in the present.
In the present, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, yeah. So you talk about this concept of the window of tolerance. Can you say more about that?
Everybody has their own unique window of tolerance, and it changes from moment to moment, depending on really what your inner resources and experiences are. So the window of tolerance is basically whatever the bandwidth is that you are able to maintain emotional equilibrium relatively easy. So if you get upset about something, you can quickly come back and not be stuck way out and upset and go off on a rant, or the opposite, being depressed and lethargic. That's also being out of your window of tolerance.
Right. So, but within the window, it's not like you're in this kind of Zen-like calm state, right? It means that you're able to flow between different emotions and responses, but you don't get stuck.
Yes. Yeah. Think about a normal day when you've had a pretty good day. You might, feel really good in the morning when you've had your coffee and you're greeting your coworkers, and then you might have kind of a slump because your coffee's worn off and you got that email that's really annoying. And then you take a break and you feel better. That's how you maintain staying in your window of tolerance while you're having your normal emotional responses and change of inner state that's responding to your environment. It's not like, oh, I have this, I'm in this sweet spot and I'm going to stay there forever. We can't function like that. We're human beings and we live in a changing world. So the real point of regulation is being able to come back to a non-dysregulated state and to flow through the various states without getting stuck in any of them.
Yeah. So when you talk about expanding your window of tolerance, that means that you've got more range that you're able to flow, between.
Yes.
I'm using the word flow. It might not always feel quite flowy, but you're able to come back more easily from a greater. I'm expanding my arms outside the screen, but yes.
When I first started working with you, if you might remember, about 4.5 years ago, my window of tolerance was very narrow. I could only maintain homeostasis and a reasonable affect if I was not stressed by many other things, because the trauma was using up so many of my resources. And as I've done this work and other recovery work, my window of tolerance is wider. So I don't go, like, if your window of tolerance is this wide, there's very little room for you before you go too high or too low. So now that my window of tolerance is wider, I have all of this space to be in rather than this. And I can notice when my activation's going up and bring it back down before I go over the top or flip my lid.
Yeah, so that was like we provocatively perhaps titled this video, "Don't Flip Your Lid, Down Regulate." So flipping your lid is when you've really probably quite quickly gone outside your window of tolerance. So if your window of tolerance is very small,
you're going to flip your lid a lot more often. And then you're going to say and do things you regret that have blowback, that causes you problems, and your life will be worse. So avoiding flipping our lid is enough reason to do this work as far as I'm concerned. Imagine if we were all capable of not blowing our lids, flipping our lids, the whole world would be a better place.
Yeah, blowing our top, flipping our lids, any of those things.
Can I do the hand model of the brain real quick?
Please do. And this comes from, who does this come from?
Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA School of Medicine. He's kind of my guru. I really appreciate his work. So he says this is
you're gonna keep it in the window of Facebook.
The tolerance of Facebook. So this is your handy model of the brain. The back of the palm here is the the brain stem, and this is your spinal cord, and this is your limbic system, and this is your prefrontal cortex. So I can't really turn my hand that way. It doesn't work. Okay. So that's your brain. And when your brain is integrated and you're in your window of tolerance, all of this can work together, and you have access to the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make good decisions, have the capacity to be in community, to feel cooperative and safe, and all the higher human things like love and poetry and music are all up here. So when we flip our lid, we actually lose physical contact with that part of our brain. And it comes on, it may seem like it comes on quickly, because that mechanism, when it finally goes, it's like a switch going off. But there are strains before that. And if we can catch ourselves because of this work or other interoceptive work, that we know what's going on in us, then when it starts to strain, we can calm ourselves down instead of letting it go.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to calm a brain that hasn't flipped than to calm one that already has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were talking before we came on air about how the body intelligence work is one way that we can become more discerning and aware of what's happening in ourselves. So that means that you can intervene when you notice the signs that it might be going toward.
Yes,
right?
because you are displaying those signs. You just don't know it. If you don't know, you aren't aware that there's anything that you can do ahead of time.
And what I mean, life is not perfect for anyone, and especially for people who are dealing with trauma and chronic stress. There are probably going to be situations where it just happens, right? What can you do when that, or is it really a matter of riding it out? Is it that we've kind of gone into full fight or flight kind of?
Yeah, basically that's what's happening. The limbic system takes over, and we hear our mother's words come out of our mouth, or we move our hand like our father used toward us, or these knee-jerk reactions come out of us, and a lot of times we can even know that it's happening. Like there are times when my mother's words came out of my mouth and I could hear them and I knew that's what it was, and I couldn't stop it. It was just happening. And it's a terrible feeling. And we can't always stop that from happening. But with information, awareness, and practice, we can more easily come back to a regulated state, and then we can deal with the fallout from flipping our lid.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned the word practice, which we've talked about before, because any of these tools, if we've not practiced them over and over, there's no way that you're going to be able to pull on them, use them, even if you're kind of getting slightly toward dysregulated, or I don't know.
Yeah. That's true. I find that when I get stressed, one of the first things that happens is I forget to do this work. But because I have practice, I don't always forget. And a lot of times I do remember, or I can calm myself enough to remember and start using them again.
Yeah, there's probably be a smaller amount of time before you have the wherewithal to come back to them.
Yeah, because I have the neural pathways built, they're there. So it's just a matter of accessing them rather than having to try to build them when I actually really need them already in place.
So I think that was the main questions I had about this topic. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about regulation, or any of these related things?
Well, generally, most people talk about a regulated nervous system in context of downregulation, because the flipping our lid is something we can all identify with. It's pretty obvious when it happens. But also regulated nervous system means that we're also not going into freeze and collapse mode, or chronic freeze and collapse like depression. Those can also be helped through these techniques of mindfulness and understanding the neurobiology of trauma. Regulating our nervous system can bring us back out of that freeze and collapse. As you well know, freeze and collapse were my primary survival tools as a kid, because my environment was so toxic that I couldn't fight and I couldn't run. So those were the only options left to me. And that made me very dissociative. So I tend to, freeze, collapse, and leave my body when, the captain says, here, tie this rope. And I forget for a second where it goes. Then, that instantly happens. So that's very difficult. And knowing these techniques and the constructive thoughts and having the practice can help bring me out of that kind of a state as well.
Yeah, I find this really interesting from my background as an Alexander Technique teacher. And in Alexander Technique, if you think of kind of a postural sets that a person might have, if you're really like this, there's a lot of tension and you need to come back to what we might call a more integrated structure, balance, ease. But in the same way, if you're really collapsed, which might be, typically very slumped, we need to come up out of it. So it's kind of very interesting in thinking of it in those other terms. It's that relationship. And of course, our postural patterns do represent how we're feeling.
Yes. We can recognize that just by if you do one of those hero poses where you stand with your feet apart and your hands on your hips and stand up, it changes your affect.
Yeah.
Right, quickly.
So in that regard, we do have a course coming up, our first 4-week online course that we're running together called Foundations of Regulation, which is for people dealing with chronic stress or trauma. And you will learn practices in this course to help you down or up regulate, to help you have a more better regulated nervous system, to help you become maybe a little more discerning so that you don't have to go as far out of regulation before you realize something is wrong, and that you have some tools that can help you come back a little more easily, a little more quickly.
And a well-regulated nervous system is key to having a good life. It makes the more regulated your nervous system, the better your life is, every level.
So that starts on February 14th, coincidentally, a very good time to maybe show a little love for yourself. I also have just a half-hour constructive rest session for stress relief that's happening next Monday. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern. So I think that's 4 p.m. in the UK, but that's just half an hour. And it would be a way to just receive a few of the ideas. Constructive rest is a very supported way of lying down that promotes good postural tone, release of excess tension, helps you calm your nervous system. But maybe if you're very more on the, what were you calling it, the low end of the window of, or below the window of tolerance, that it could help you. It can also be enlivening. In fact, some Alexander teachers call it active rest. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
It is very refreshing.
I'll put this fancy banner on for our course. That's the URL for the web address for our course. So it's imogenregone.com, Foundations of Regulation.
I think your constructive rest sessions are a really great way to just have a little taste of what this work can do for us.
Yes. Yeah. So we very happy. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments. Possibly you have been commenting and we cannot see it until we come out of StreamYard. Well, now I might be able to see one. Yes. Okay, we've got a couple of comments from Desiree and Borit. We'll get back to you afterwards. Our next video next week, we're having a few of these conversations. It's going to be about the non-coercive nature of the body intelligence approach and why this is crucial when dealing with stress and maybe trauma especially.
I'm excited about that one. It's so
yes.
important to me.
Yeah.
I'll have
so I hope Okay. Yes, this has been a bit longer than a nice kind of just about 10 minutes last week, but yeah, very useful information. Thank you, Shay, and looking
Thank
forward
you.
to our next conversation. All right.